My name is Beth, and this is my story. So I guess my story starts in high school. I was the one that hung out with the popular kids. I was the one that was on homecoming court, and I was the one that got to speak at graduation, and I thought that's what made me happy. I'd invested a lot into high school relationships, but I was really excited to go off to college. I was still going to invest a lot of time in these high school relationships because I was going to school close to home. So I got to college, and the first couple months I was there, we had this thing called Girls Weekend. And at Girls Weekend, I thought that I would just get to hang out with a bunch of girls, and that it would be a really great time. But when I got there, they started talking about God. And while it was something that I'd heard about and I was kind of curious about, I didn't really know what that looked like. We had this thing called quiet time one morning that we were there, and it was a time set aside where you had to be quiet. And I had no idea what that looked like. I remember sitting on the dock of a lake and just saying, God, if you love me, I need to see that right now. And I waited 5 minutes and I didn't see it. But that night we were watching a video about Beth Moore, and she was talking about how big God was and how he has the entire world in his hands. That song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, that's about God. I didn't know that. But I also realized that God had my life in his hands and that he had a plan for my life and he really cared about me. And so I went out to that same dock that I had sat on earlier that day and cried and prayed. And I said, God, I know you love me. I know you have a plan for my life. And I was so willing to invest into that relationship like I had my high school friends. And I did for 24 hours. And then I went back to school and finished out the school year and finished out my summer just like I had not known God's love before. And because I wasn't living in this joy that God had promised me that night, it was separating me from God. At the beginning of my sophomore year, so almost a full year since my first experience with God, I really had a really great experience at church one morning. We were just praying, and I don't remember what the sermon was on or what we were talking about, but I do remember thinking that God had brought me so far in such a year when I wasn't pursuing a relationship with him at all, that he was pursuing me, that I had done nothing. And I also realized that day the importance of Jesus and what Jesus had done for me. God had sent Jesus to die for my wrongdoings. And so that time that I had spent since God had first shown me that he loved me, not living in him, was covered by what Jesus had done, Jesus' death. And so since that day, since I prayed to receive God and really start living a relationship with God, my life's been dramatically changed. I was 19 years old when that happened, and I've never been happier. I saw a saying on a church billboard that said, faith makes things possible, not easy. And that's been such a huge thing for me. Accepting God into my life hasn't made my life simple. It's made it even harder. And I constantly try and look for happiness in other people, but God's shown me that he's my only source of happiness. And I've never been happier in my whole life.